Hi, my name is Sharon.
Hi, Sharon.
I have a problem. I'm a technology addict. Welcome to the Human Frequency. We have not been around for a while. We lost our computer a month ago, and this is what brought to light my technology addiction. So we're back today after a long hiatus, longer than usual, to talk about my technology addiction. And I hope that by discussing this problem openly and having admitted that I have a problem, that you may be able to heal this addiction within yourselves as well.
Well, I'm not going to just let you stand on the soapbox for however long we're going to talk, because I have a technology addiction problem too, to a lesser extent than you do perhaps, and in a different way, because we both come from different generations, and two different generations will inevitably handle technology differently in their lives.
Right, and you grew up with computers, and I, on the other hand, well, I did grow up with computers, but they weren't computers as we know it. I had an Apple II Plus that was handed down to me by my cousins. In that era was the era of the Apple IIc computer. That was the one that we had in our schools, in elementary school. So that was about 1984 when I started using a machine, and I loved it. I loved it from the beginning, and I loved video games, and I liked learning how to do programming on it so that I could draw pictures with the graphics, and I did a lot with the machine, even from around the second grade, which is, now I've revealed my age. I am 43 years old. It's important to know that because it has a lot to do with my technology addiction. Although my computing experience began with a different type of computer than yours did, Gabe.
Well, your computing experience began before I was even born.
That's true. That's true.
I am 34 years old, so that gives you a perspective on where I came from. And I had some IBM computer when I was about 8 or so that's 93. It wasn't a Windows computer. I didn't do very much on it. I got my first true computer in 1996, which was a Windows 95, and that was also the same year that a first-person shooter video game named Quake came out. So I got into that shortly thereafter, and then Quake 2 came out the following year, and it kind of progressed from there. But I really had an affinity for those first-person shooter video games when I was that age. And I never really played Nintendo or Sega or any of those things that were around earlier in the 90s. But when I got this new computer, I really just kind of dove headlong into those games.
Well, there's two things people do on computers more than anything else, and one of them is play video games.
That's true. Yeah. And let's talk about that one, and only that one.
Well, yeah, your experience with computers is different from mine because of generation difference. That is interesting that you had the IBM compatible computer in 1993 because my parents bought me my first computer around that time. And of course, they had to be as cheap as possible. Let's not get into that. But yeah, I was the kid that did not have any video game system. We did not have cable. Those things cost money, and that was not an option. So they bought a computer, though, around that time, in the early 90s, and it was also an IBM compatible computer. They can only show 3 colors at a time on the screen, but it was a lot better than the Apple II Plus we had before, that we still had before that. Amazing how long they lasted back then, isn't it?
Yeah, well,
they didn't break.
They built them a little sturdier back
but they
then.
also didn't hold anything. So anyway, I did have that kind of computer too, but it's not a real computer. I would say that my real computing experience began around when yours did, in the mid-90s. I wasn't really into it at that time. I was kind of actually anti-computer at that point in my life. But by the late 90s, I had to learn to use one again, and so I learned Windows machines for work. I had to. So, I would say over 20 years, I've been a heavy computer user because I started needing it for work, and then I got my own computer, and I just started to get into the normal computer lifestyle that everyone has today.
Well, yeah, because as the technology progressed and the usage of computers became more pervasive in our work lives and our personal lives and whatever, it just, I mean, how many people in the mid-2000s were still using a typewriter or something like that?
I was using one in college all the way through 98.
Yeah, but
I was really not wanting to get a computer of my own.
But much later, what I'm saying is when after after the Windows like NT and 2000 and ME, when those and XP stuff like that, when those started coming out, that really was that was the end of those old things.
Well, it was the end of the old days, and I would say that this modern era began with Windows 95. I think that life has changed with Microsoft, and I know a lot of people have a lot of problems with that company, and I do too.
Yeah, us included.
But we use the machines. We use Windows 7 machines. So I have a traditional approach to computing. I never really thought of myself as a technology addict because I think of them as work tools. But it turns out that recently, almost a month ago, when our computer crashed on us, that my feelings towards the computer were a little different than I had realized. I looked at it as a tool and as a work thing. It turns out that my personal life and my entertainment and schedule and phone numbers and everything that was something that belonged to me, not a public thing, but just a part of my daily life at home, that was deeply affected by the loss of the computer. And I didn't realize how dependent I was on it for just about everything. I criticize people for their dependence on cell phones, which is actually worse. We're going to get into that later about the addictive nature of EMF and the addictive nature of the computers and phones themselves. But I will say right out, my addiction is largely mental, not so much physical, and it's because I've become dependent on the machine for everything.
Well, as is the case with many aspects of human life, it's unfortunate that it's this way, but oftentimes it takes a disaster of some kind to get one to really rethink how they are with anything, how any aspect of their life needs to be changed. And this was no exception. It took the whole thing dying on us, and fortunately we had backed up most of our stuff, but even still, the feeling of having it running perfectly one night and then the next day gone.
It was not even one night to the next day. It was one moment to the next. It was so traumatic when it happened. And I'm sure anyone who's had a computer crash and burn knows that feeling.
Mm-hmm. And if you haven't backed up your stuff or haven't backed up as much as you should have, it's even worse. But even if you've backed up 100% of everything, it's still it really hits you when it happens. And it gives you a moment away from the computer to think about what the computer is in your life, like what kind of position it holds in your life.
Yeah, that's true. So when it happened, it's going on 1 month, and this has been a long saga. As you can see, we're finally back up and running now. It took a while. When it happened, it was like a shock to the system. Here I am having my morning, getting ready, just checking my mail, getting ready to get to work. And all of a sudden, from one moment to the next, the computer just completely died on me. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. The hard drive was faulty and something went wrong with it. And so anyway, we immediately rushed it to the doctor down in Santa Clarita. We went to the computer guy who took it from us and said, I hope for the best. I hope I can get it working for you again. And, it took a while to find out the bad news. In the meantime, we had a real issue because we couldn't do our work. We have one machine besides this one. It's a 12-year-old laptop. It's a lovable Sony Vaio. There I said it, lovable. I think of them like pets. This is the problem. I think of them like Data on Star Trek, who is the lovable android. But it's artificial intelligence, and I love this old computer. But it's not healthy to love a computer. What I love about it is it's old and it runs great.
Oh my
and
God.
It has old Windows 7 from the very early days. It's just so user-friendly, unlike today's machines.
Well, a 12-year-old computer is like a 200-year-old human. It's unheard of, basically.
And because of this, it was very nerve-wracking to lose our work tool because we have to run our website. We've got to answer people's questions about Organite. People want to buy stuff from us. That's how we survive and keep working and researching and gifting. So it was all of a sudden this major part of our office and our work life was gone. And we've got this podcast. It's great to get information out. And all of a sudden I felt crippled. In my blog, there's another one. I do that every day.
Well, everything
I felt
just
crippled.
Immediately descended into chaos. And you can't prepare for something like this. It's just...
Well, we could have by buying a new computer a long time ago. But nevertheless, we had to continue working and we were about to go on a gifting trip, which made this all the more difficult. I had already booked our stay for our gifting in Fresno. And that is a sure thing where we had to gift Fresno. And that was an amazing gifting, but I can't do that kind of work without bringing a computer, because all day long I take pictures and document what it looked like when we got there. We look at the atmospheric health. We look at what the clouds look like, what the temperature is, and how the people are behaving. There's so many things we look at, which I record, I write about, and I take pictures. So all day I took pictures, and in the evening I have to come back and post that onto Tumblr, because that's how we prove the work we do is with those date stamps. It's day after day after day. So I had to say, this is what Fresno looked like when we got here. This is what Fresno looked like after a day of gifting. This is what Fresno looked like the next morning. And so all this has to be documented in real time.
Right. The point is, going on this gifting trip, any gifting trip, in fact, without a computer is not an option.
Right.
Because this has to be recorded in real time. That's how, like you said, that's how orgone energy's effect on the atmosphere is proven over time.
Right. It's all pictures and just recording your observations. So we went on the trip and we did a wonderful gifting of Fresno, and we did it with only this old computer with us, which we barely used because I'm so sensitive about overworking it. It's in its retirement. It's like semi-retirement right now. So I still use it, but lightly. But we did it. We got through it, and I hope you'll all check out the blog. It's thekembo.tumblr.com. That's where I record these things day by day, and I write articles with different observations about orgone energy, and every time we gift, there's great pictures. So if you check some of the recent entries, you'll see the spectacular change that happened in Fresno while we were there. It went from flat, gray, hot, stagnant day 1. Day 2, we woke up, and I knew this would happen. I said, hey, it's going to take a while to transmute. It's going to take all night. We woke up the next morning and it was like pristine clarity, blue skies to the horizon, puffy clouds like cotton balls, and a cool breeze blowing. And the temperature dropped, I would say, about 10 degrees from one day to the next.
Yeah, give or take. But this happens every time we do this. And yeah, do check out the blog. And you can find the link on the website. At the bottom, there's a little
thekembo.com.
a little T icon, and you click on that and you find the blog.
Yeah, I actually try to make it pretty easy to find the stuff if you'll take the time to look on a computer screen at my website, because the website is like a book in itself. It's very in-depth. You can't look at it on a smartphone. It'll give you a headache to look through all that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did get through it. We took the old computer, and then while we were on that trip, we were waiting for news from the computer guy, and the news was not good. I got it right before we came back into town, in where we live. The computer was dead. So we knew we'd have to do something about that, but we still had another trip coming up that was planned. And this was a trip to the Antelope Valley, which was necessary because we were going to document the poppy blooms. There were super blooms this year in California. I'm sure a lot of people around the country have heard about Lake Elsinore, California, that had what they called the poppy apocalypse because there were so many poppies growing. This small city of Lake Elsinore couldn't handle the tens of thousands of people coming in over the weekends to see them.
From all over the world,
It was a fascinating winter and spring so far here in Southern California. But we went more locally to us. We live near the Antelope Valley, so we went down and we checked out the amazing poppy blooms, and we couldn't get into the poppy preserve either, by the way. It was completely overrun. I mean, it's poppy mayhem in California, and it's all because of the rains from the orgonite distribution all over the country. And then we also documented beautiful blooming Joshua trees. That's a rare event. Only on heavy rainy years does that happen. So that was a wonderful trip to the Antelope Valley, and guess what? We didn't take a computer with us at all. I didn't record it on the blog until after because it wasn't actually a gifting trip. So I had the option to go on a trip, and it was the weekend too. So if people had questions about our orgonite or just general questions, we just got back to them on Monday. So it was great. No computer. What an amazing experience. I haven't been on a trip without a laptop computer since the early 2000s.
And probably in about 5 years or so for myself. So that was nice to do. change of pace.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the reason that I bring all this up is because I realized that I was not just using this computer as a work tool, but that I had developed an unhealthy attachment to computers in general. Because I am an advanced computer user, I know how to do many kinds of applications. I don't know much about smartphones at all. So people think I'm anti-technology because I don't use technology that harms me energetically. That's the important distinction. Is I actually am not anti-technology. I have tons of technology. As you can see from the website, we do a lot of things with our computers. We run a website, a store, a YouTube channel, a blog. It's a huge part of our work. So I'm not anti-technology, and I use it for emails and calendar and phone numbers and all this stuff that I actually should, a lot of stuff I should be keeping on paper. That's another thing I've learned is the value of writing it down.
Right. But the point is you have standards for your technology, and so do I.
Right.
Because when you factor in what we've learned about wireless technology and wireless frequencies over the years, it doesn't make sense for us to use something that we know is so harmful.
It's not just knowing it's harmful, it's that we literally go berserk around those frequencies and can't handle ourselves. When we arrived at our Airbnb in Fresno, there was a huge Wi-Fi, like a mega Wi-Fi unit in that place. I've never seen such a big one. And I knew that we usually put a little tensor ring from Twisted Sage against the Wi-Fi unit. And I'm not even so sure of how the tensor rings work even to this day. But they do similar things to Orgonite as far as neutralizing the EMF or making it smoother. So I always just lean it up on there, and then we fill our room with Orgonite. And by doing these things, we feel okay while we're at our Airbnb. Even though it's not perfect, it's better. We forgot to neutralize the Wi-Fi, and we tried cooking dinner, and we started having a fight. And it was like a fight about nothing. And honestly, it was so stupid that we both realized and stopped and said, oh, we forgot to neutralize the Wi-Fi.
The ring. Then you grab it, put it on there, and it literally goes right on it. So it's right there.
And so amazingly, then we felt better instantly. Although I have to tell you, I'm not advocating gadget solutions to Wi-Fi units, and that even includes Orgonite. I am saying that if you're somewhere where there's no choice, that's what you do. If it's your own house, you don't have the EMF emitter to begin with. Why bring essentially a cell phone tower into your own house and then neutralize it? Why not just not have it in your house? We're going to talk more about this in the future, about how to hardwire your home, because everyone deserves to have full access to the internet and a good computing experience that's EMF free, at least as far as EMF from wireless. Yes, electricity produces EMF. Yes, your computer screen produces it, but it's a different type of radiation than the mind control frequency that also causes cancer that comes out of a Wi-Fi unit.
So there's stages, though. Obviously, the best thing to do is, like you just said, in your own home, don't have the stuff at all, like complete abstinence. If that's not possible, like if you have a roommate that insists on Wi-Fi, then the next best thing to do is to neutralize the sources that are there. So there are gradations here, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. And so I don't use a smartphone, period. I have one that gets turned on when I'm en route to my Airbnb and need to text the host, something like that, and then it gets turned off again. Or just if I have to make an emergency call, like if we get a flat tire, I turn it on and call AAA. This is the use of our smartphone. And the only reason we got a smartphone instead of keeping the dumb phone is just for when we have to do an event, which we don't do anymore because I think ergonomy is a little, no one wants to hear about it. That's true. Nobody wants to hear it.
But when we were doing events, we needed the card reader from Square to run sales.
And sometimes you need to look something up because, whatever. But it's pretty rare that you need to do anything like that. So myself, I use a map to get where I'm going. I don't use GPS. I see no need to use these things for basic functions that we should be able to do with our own minds. So anyway, I'm not anti-technology. That's how this whole discussion started. I actually love it and love it to a fault. I have unhealthy feelings towards my computers. I think of them as living things. Although they are artificial intelligence, they are not life as we know it. And sometimes they seem to have a mind of their own, if you've noticed. And that's kind of troubling too. They change sometimes on you and you don't know why. Things get weird in there. I've had computers heal when I've put energy towards, like my monitor was flickering and it was having problems. And I actually somehow 7 years ago healed my computer mentally. So I don't know.
Well, you also stopped opening and closing it. You just kind of let it be, and it did get better over time.
Yeah, but see, thinking of that computer as like a part of me, as an appendage, this is not a good way to think about him. I understand my unhealthy attachment, and interestingly enough, in this month of computer problems that we've had, I don't really want to use them very much anymore. The house changed when we didn't have the computer for a few days. We didn't have the computer on the coffee table in the living room as the centerpiece like we have had for 7 years, more. I had it that way before I met Gabriel. He came into my house and that computer was there waiting by the couch to become a part of his life as well. We had no computer. We had to listen to CDs for music. We had to watch DVDs for entertainment. All of a sudden it was like the 90s again. And it was like I had bugs under my skin. I was missing this machine so much. I was like, how can I put on a CD for music? That's so much work. I just want to click on the MP3 that I want to hear. Right. I have actually changed. The computer has changed me. My addiction is mental. It changes the way your mind works.
But you and I couldn't have figured out these things had this not happened.
Oh,
because
no.
we need it's like two things. We need to think about it, but we can't think about it as long as it's there. We need the absence of it to be able to, I feel like I was saying this earlier.
I was forced into it. So It was like God said, you've got a problem. And here's something that was very interesting is after a few days of it, when I started to settle in and the withdrawal symptoms were reducing in me, I realized, that this was taken away from me so that I could improve and actually raise my level of consciousness. I always think about how to get out of here because this dimension is killing me. And I always am trying. How am I going to get out of here? And I learned a long time ago that the idea of a human ascension, it's the event. There's going to be this great thing. We're all going to go up into the stars together. It's total BS because no one can do that because they're smartphone addicts. That's the whole point of the smartphone is to keep people from being able to ascend higher dimensions. It reroutes your mental pathways. So even I've had that problem in the absence of wireless. I still had my mental pathways rerouted by the machine. And the message I got was loud and clear. I might be a higher level of consciousness than a smartphone addict, but I'm not a high enough level of consciousness to get out of here. There's a long ways to go. And I didn't know that my consciousness level was being so squashed by my tech addiction.
And being without it for so long was considerably more difficult than going without leavened bread for one entire week.
It actually was much more difficult. I really enjoyed a week of matzah.
Me too.
It's great to obey God, and the rewards are unbelievable. You can't believe it.
Organic matzah, by the way.
Yeah.
100%.
100% organic matzah. The rewards are astonishing, and I can only say that it's hard for me to even explain it. It's something that you feel inside when you do the right thing. And the right thing is to obey the law of the universe, the natural law. If God says to do it, this is the cosmic energy of creation saying that this is set up a certain way. And if you don't follow it, you're not going to be happy. And it's true. But I see different variations in it. Some people who are really evil, their lives are a mess. And people who really try hard but don't get it, their lives are better and they're happier. And then there's people who really get it and they're the happiest people that you'll ever meet. So, it's just different levels. But my consciousness was being squashed by my computer addiction. It's not the real world. It's a flat, false reality that's all just digital bytes of information. It's just binary digital information being translated to your mind. And it's not really real. There's something very different about touching a tree and being next to a tree than seeing a picture of a tree on a computer screen. So I was forced to get out of that world and back into the real world, spend more time outside doing the things I love anyway. And the quietness, the mind quiets once you get past the initial withdrawal symptoms. You'll feel it, and your consciousness goes up, and you become just one step higher, one vibration higher to getting out of here already. And that's the goal. We all want to get out of here, right? That's why we're all listening today.
Yes, but with any addiction, the temptation to go back into it can be pretty immense, I would imagine.
It is.
So that's just another challenge on the way.
You know what? I think that there's an interesting thing going on right now, which is the parasites. Their attacks always backfire, and I received this interim computer from the computer guy. It was a Windows 8 machine, and obviously I was very skeptical of such a thing. And he says, but it has a Windows 7 classic shell, so it'll look like Windows 7 and behave like Windows 7. And this computer was old. It was kind of an interim computer just to get us to our next computer. And actually, it was as old as the computer that died on us, so I should have not taken on this machine. But I took it, I started working with it, and it was a nightmare. Even with the Windows 7 interface, every setting on it was as counterintuitive as possible. And I realized this machine, these Windows 8 and Windows 10 machines that Microsoft is forcing on the public now, they're forcing Windows 10 on everyone because they're making Windows 7 support obsolete. But anyway, the idea here is we should be getting away from them anyway. But I think that these machines are designed to ruin your computing experience and make it so complicated that you just feel like a smartphone will be easier. I think they want people using smartphones instead of computers. It's so much easier to control people through it.
Well, they make all the default settings on these computers to be as counterintuitive as possible. So and it's without exception, every single one. When you get the computer and you're customizing it, you're setting up your preferences the way you want it to be. Well, it's incredibly difficult because everything comes with it wrong.
Well, let me tell you something about God's sense of humor. And it's not a sick sense of humor like Depeche Mode thinks. It really isn't. It's actually very much in our benefit to accept these things when they happen. But as soon as I had that Windows 8 machine, I was one setting away from having it be normal. And I know how to get in there and change everything. I turned this machine into my machine. It took like an evening and a day. And I was almost done. And then the whole thing crashed and burned on me, just like our old computer did. And I thought, I can't believe this. What is God doing to me here? Obviously, I have a problem, and he wants to help me get over it.
Being a millennial, I don't exactly get your Gen X Depeche Mode reference.
Oh, it comes from the song Blasphemous Rumors. I'm going to spare everybody my singing right now. You can, if you want to listen to it, but
look it up.
All that music
on a computer, not a smartphone.
I don't listen to that kind of music so much anymore. They were one of my favorite bands, but too much satanic influence in the rock and roll world. I really only listen to ambient music now, and
minimal satanic influence.
There's like no satanic influence in that. No one ever even has heard of these people. But anyway. Yeah, I do have a history of listening to a lot of rock music, and I used to want a lot of stimulation, and now I want a quiet life. And I think part of that is reducing my tech addiction. We went Wi-Fi free in the summer of 2014, and our consciousness went through the roof. We started being able to keep the sky clean with our minds, and we really saw the difference. And I have blog entries about this if you want to go back to August of 2014 and September of 2014, and then see what happened in October of 2014 when we tried turning it on again.
It got worse almost instantly.
So, we really saw the mind connection with the orgone energy. And then we went cell phone free in the winter of 2016 when we moved up to the mountains, and our T-Mobile phones, or our Virgin mobile phones, didn't work up here. And instead of switching to a plan that worked up here, we just ditched them and said, hey, let's get a landline. So we have a corded landline now. And our consciousness has improved tremendously since we got rid of the cell phone. And I bring all this up because I know that if I have a problem here, that a lot of people do. It's not just me. And we all need to tackle this if we want to ascend levels. And you're not going to do it as a tech addict. You're just not going to, because that's fake technology. That's the digital world. That's the 2D. It's fake. The ascension is the technology beyond the technology we know. And believe me, I know that we have senses in our bodies and minds that we can't even fathom right now. We'll be able to experience, see, feel beyond sight or feeling. We have 5 senses.
Well, some people have 6.
And that's what I'm getting at. The 6th sense is the unknown, though. That is the ESP, the mental level where you're starting to be able to read thoughts, emotions, that kind of stuff, become empathic. I know that there are senses even beyond that. And I know as a technology addict, I'll never experience them. It's time to move on.
And concerning mine, I know I mentioned earlier mine was a little different than yours, but I never had my own computer. I always relied on someone else's. And I did that really for 2 reasons. The main reason, obviously, because I was most often too broke to afford my own. I'll admit it. Mm-hmm. But the second reason was that I just felt that not having my own made it a little easier to detach from it. I didn't feel like you did about computers, like it was like a limb or an appendage. It didn't feel that way to me. And I kept my relationship with my computer at a distance, having it not be mine. Mm-hmm. And I feel that helped.
Yeah, I actually envy you a little bit for that, because I've become too dependent on him. But at the same time, I can't even tell you how many pictures I have from 6 years of photographing the sky. I mean, I feel like I have tens of thousands of files, and it's important because it's all part of the research. So I've got to keep all that. I keep all my writing, tons of articles, which nobody reads, by the way. Please look at my website. I put so much work into it, and I get so many emails from people who are asking me questions that are answered on the website. I can give you a better answer there than I can by email. Although I do like to hear from you with your feedback, and I appreciate everybody who listens and watches and reads and gets in touch. There's so much on that website I wish that people would take advantage of. Years and years and years of writing and research, and videos for people who don't like to read, but I am a writer, and it's all written very clearly and concisely. You can see exactly what Organite does. I do get a lot of emails, by the way, from technology addicts and people who are more addicted than me. And I can recognize it. And especially now that I've seen it in myself, I feel that I can really offer the tools to help you overcome your technology addiction. And everything I've said about giving up smartphones, I stand by that. And I really hope you'll try it, because that's the first step. That's the first step towards losing your tech addiction, is to go back to using a regular phone. That's a very important thing you can do. The other thing is stop using Wi-Fi, or at least turn it off when you sleep. But honestly, the cell phones, they are the worst problem. People can't concentrate on anything, and it reflects in the emails I get. And the phones are literally controlling your mind. You can't think straight. Don't think you're above it. I'm not above it either. No one is.
Neither am I. But the point is, we do rail on the smartphone addicts quite a lot. But the fact is, we had our problems, and we can admit it. So if we can, you can also admit it.
Mm-hmm. And I do actually need to make an addendum right now to our last episode about why we don't do interviews anymore. Because one of the reasons was, and this is one of the biggest reasons, is that all of the available interviewees are smartphone addicts. And, that problem's actually gotten even worse. So as my addendum to it, just as an FYI, I'm not speaking poorly of the people we've interviewed, but they are all smartphone addicts, and even ones that I never expected. So Ken Rowland now is using a smartphone. I've seen it in his videos on YouTube. And if he's using one, that's confusing to me, because he said not to use them years ago. And when I met him at the 5D event, he didn't use one, and I didn't use one. And so it did come as a little bit of a surprise to me. I mean, maybe he feels he needs it for his work, but it's important to know that anybody who has done related work in fields related to what we do with Orgonomy knows better than to use a smartphone. So if they are using one, it doesn't negate the true things they've said, but it does change how they think and how they're going to communicate going forward. So just be aware that information coming from a smartphone user is not going to be clean and pure. It can't be because it's tarnished by that mind control signal. And there's a guy we never interviewed, but I learned a lot from and respect very much. That's Dewin Gardner, the Science of Rain author. He was a genius, and I've seen him on YouTube more recently, and he's gone. He's not there anymore. Not only did he become a smartphone addict, but he's completely controlled by it. I mean, he talks to it like, Google, tell me what time it is. Google, what day is it? And this kind of stuff. So that doesn't change the wonderful information he's put out, but I would be cautious about anything going forward because he is completely not in control of his mind based on what I've seen on the videos. And with that said, I do advocate an abstinence from YouTube junk. Most stuff on YouTube is absolute garbage. If you think this show is, that's fine. I would understand people never checking it out because almost everything on YouTube is absolute garbage.
I would understand it too, quite frankly. I mean,
yeah.
It's like something out of a science fiction novel. What happened to Dewin, who is his channel on YouTube is Organite Austin, which I know you just said to avoid YouTube junk, but
yeah,
I'm not saying that he's junk.
Good. His old stuff is good. Like from 2014 around then and before. But the thing is, YouTube has really just gotten more and more trashy, and the independent media has gotten more and more trashy. It's like, to me, it's just like an alternative version of Yahoo now. It's just sensationalistic junk, unfortunately. People who think they know about how the weather works, talking about the cataclysms in our weather, when in actuality everything is the exact opposite, and it's just like everything's balancing and becoming beautiful. And all of the stuff about deep state and government. If I could put deep state on the forbidden words list of 2018, I would, but I'm not doing those lists anymore because I don't pay attention to that junk anymore. I'd put mud flood and deep state on that list, and I never even want to hear those words again. Anyway, so we just need to take a step back, maybe read a book, go for a hike, walk the dog, walk the horse,
walk the cat,
whatever you do,
walk the marmoset,
get out of the house, stand barefoot on the earth, go to the beach, go to the desert, do something that doesn't involve your computer, and read the Bible. That's where the wisdom is. Just get off that machine. Spend some time with somebody. Ask them to leave their cell phone at home. You leave your cell phone at home. Have a real conversation. Here's a few ideas for you. But most of all, look at your technology use and evaluate if you feel it's healthy or not. And I can tell you it probably isn't, because mine wasn't. And I'm very aware of this stuff. And even I'm, having to deal with this now.
And I just want to do a little preventative action here against keyword shutdown. When we say read the Bible, please don't think we're religious, because we are not. Religions are one of the greatest forms of mind control ever on this planet, yes. And perhaps the most pervasive.
Thank you for saying that, because
but what I'm trying to say here is that religion has nothing to do with God.
Absolutely
never has.
We'll do an episode about that later too, but I've learned a lot by I grew up Jewish, and I've looked into what is Christianity because I thought I was becoming a Christian, but it turns out I'm not. I'm not neither religion. I am a theist. That's what I've learned. So the religion I grew up with isn't my religion, and there's no new religion for me. And we'll talk about that later, but that's good that you mention it, because I'm not religious at all. But I do believe in the perfect law of God, and I don't think that it only came from the Bible. The native indigenous peoples of this world knew it too. So this is universal knowledge. It just needs to be understood by everyone, and it's different for different cultures.
Yes, and considering that orgonomy is the study of God, it ties in perfectly with our work. So
Absolutely.
There's no reason to shy away from this subject at all.
Absolutely. So that's all I have to say about my tech addiction. I hope this has helped you. I usually like to share my problems publicly if I think it'll help you, and if I don't think it'll help you, I'm not going to burden you with my troubles. But anyway, I hope this helped. Thanks so much for listening. You could check out our work at thekembo.com, and please check out the best of the blog, or just click on the Tumblr blog and see what we've been up to, because we've taken care of a lot of cell phone towers. Very likely have covered them in your area if you're in the Western U.S. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks for your support, and we will see you again next time.